Welcome back to another episode of A Record of My Father. Here we are today, back again. I think we're going to talk about an ever-pressing issue of what patriotism is right now and how that's defined, and if it really is just kind of a reiteration of nationalism or whatever you guys think out there. What do you think?
Well, I think that when we talk about patriotism, we have to see what we as ourselves believe that it is. I mean, you can go online and you can look it up, and what I just cut it. Of course, I cut everything off, and I don't. It's my thing to say what a good thing to do is to start with what is the definition. You know, uh, uh, of patriotism.
Yep.
Patriotism, a feeling of love, devotion, and sense of attachment to a country or state. You know,
Okay.
according to definition and meaning for uh, love for or devotion to one's country. I mean, think about that. That's what it is. It's love for a country. And
Gotcha.
I mean, when I think about things, when people talk about, oh, the left is not patriotic or the right's more patriotic or whatever, and people waving flags and all that kind of stuff, and you're proud of we the best country in the world, and it's like, I don't. I
Yeah.
mean, from where I sit, I think that if you have to wear something on your sleeve, that it's a little disingenuous, but that's just me.
Fair. Well, I'll flip this back on you, and it's the nationalism definition is the identification with one's own nation and support for its interests, especially to the exclusion or detriment of the interests of other nations. And I mean,
That's where I get in trouble because
mhm, yeah,
I mean, but yeah, I think that's a real problem when they talk about how to the detriment of other nations, all of a sudden you become can we get more if we align with shitty people? And the answer is yes, we can. If the US aligned with Russia and China and we decided that we wanted to own the rest of the world, we could in a three-way tier. We could do it. And think about the power and money and whatever any of the citizens of those three countries wanted, they would have. But that would be morally wrong. Okay.
yes,
And that would be very nationalistic, which is what, you hear the administration that was cozying up to the dictators. And it's like, yeah, but generally when you see what happens with those countries when they have this huge super ego person at the top, usually he takes all the spoils for him and his select group of buddies,
oh yeah, that's what you saw with
and
the
then he
Sochi
doesn't and he
Olympics.
doesn't
Yeah,
really share it. I mean, when you think about and people go, "Oh, China's communist," and it's like, dude, do you think the guy at the top lives in the same house as the guy in the middle? Not
yeah,
even.
no. Well, Mao
No.
Zedong's version of communism is also not the blanketed communism
Right.
that was depicted by Karl Marx. I mean,
Yeah.
Mao Zedong's version of communism was originated from a dictatorship, not necessarily what would be kind of an anarcho communistic small communities and things like that that are not dictated on a precipice of overall leader. Right.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, and so that's why you
Exactly.
get different iterations of different political spectrums, I think.
Well, it's always going to be a splish and a splash of different things,
Yeah.
you know? And it's like when I think of patriotism, it's like I think people say, oh, we have the greatest country in the world. It's like, well, I mean, in some respects we do, but to blanketly say that is just factually incorrect. When you start to look at all the different things that we have that are subpar compared to other countries, our children don't live as long. We have a higher death mortality rate than 20 other nations, and it's like, but we spend six times what they do on healthcare. So that's just and my view of patriotism is that it isn't that we're perfect, but it's that we have the capability to change ourselves to be perfect. We can do better, and I think that you know that's a really it's a completely different thing. That is to go back to a previous time and say that we could be better, we were better then, is just factually incorrect for a large portion of the population.
Well, that's the whole purpose of the First Amendment, right? Is so that
Right.
we have the wherewithal or the legal ability to say what and how we want things changed. And I
Right.
don't understand this whole nuanced idea currently that critiquing your country in different ways and not just accepting the I don't know, the unfairness of certain aspects of it is that means you hate it and you should get out.
Yeah.
You should get out of here if you don't like it. But if
Yeah.
I ever love something, it's to come to a compromise with whatever kind of adversary
Yeah. I think in
opinion that
certain
we're dealing with. Yeah.
and certain times in the political prospect in political times, we've been easier to compromise. And now it seems like that people hate the word compromise. There's and and you can point your fingers wherever you want to point them. But I think that the way that this country has been so good is that there's always been a swinging portion, whether it be left or right, where they would say, "Oh, it's better for the nation to have roads and bridges built than it is for me to let than it is for me to suffer the consequences of this existing president looking better. It's better for the nation to increase border security than it is for me to, you know what I mean? And it's like
Yeah.
you see this over and over and over where there's a fight, and there was a fight on the other side too, and there were things that were happening in the previous administration where you don't want to make them look too good near the end of their term, you know, because it's a political thing that you think about what's happening and what's going into the future. Some are much more adamant that they don't, the only good person on either side is a dead person on either side, which is a little to the extreme.
I don't understand the level of hatred in the political sphere now, right?
Yeah.
Because it seems as if you had people that were neighbors their whole life, and all of a sudden they have a difference in political agenda, and they don't remember those memories that they have. They only remember their current outlook on politics, and then they thus hate each other, which I don't necessarily understand. I don't understand how you could look at your own political ideology and delete things that have defined you as a person and just define yourself on the political spectrum instead.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah. It
Well,
doesn't
because
really
I
make
mean, in
sense
some
to me.
respects, you get behind somebody that says that you were mistaken in all those ideas, and that person on the other side is the reason that you are having hard times. That I have somehow ignored all of Zach's faults through all this time, and I never realized it. But he's the reason that my life is bad. He's the reason that I have this thing. He's the, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, it's not, it's not what you believe. It's basically we have a scapegoat for all of the bad things that's happened in our life. And I see that that's like this big focus that, you know, most of what legislation, government, and all that stuff does is, you know, a portion of it is very helpful, a smattering of it's here and here and here, but there's always going to be issues with some part of it. There's it's never perfect. It's just like any company. There's 1 to 3% of waste, 3% of bad product. There's 1 to 3% of just, and this is the same way it is in the government. I believe, and I think that whether you choose to focus on the poor part or the lion's share of which is the wonderful part or the good part or what you intended to do. I mean, every time I talk about or think about legislation, I always think about the Clean Water Act that Nixon passed in 72. And
Wonderful,
then,
wonderful act.
and you go look at the Chesapeake Bay because, in the 70s
Potomac
up
River
until,
too.
yeah, we used to just throw trash out the window. You know, we threw trash. You emptied your ashtrays in parking lots. People did that. I mean, it was, and I don't care if someone says they didn't. Bullshit.
Well, I
You
also
finished
think
your sandwich and you threw the trash out the window. I mean, just think about the mindset. And I've seen this. I saw this in the early 90s when I was in India and we were in Delhi and we're in this field and it's like 10 football fields. It's a huge parade ground. It's the biggest one in Delhi. And we went there for lunch and we went to see one of these great trees and there's thousands of people there and they all have their food in all these little styrofoam things. And when they finish, they just shake the blanket on the ground and the wind just blows it to the edge. And there's like a fence around, and there's just piles of trash all the way around. And there's just no thought to that being disgusting. None. And that is the way the Americans were in the 60s and the 50s. It was over. Everything was use it and lose it, throw it away. But then there's all sorts of things that we changed. It's like we were worried about glass and how, hey, that's heavy, so let's use plastic. It's plastic.
Then you look at the polyfluorides that 3M generated. I just read an
Yeah,
article on that, and that's another great
but it's
kind of
cheaper.
thing of that the EPA did was that they prosecuted 3M on a $453 million lawsuit for the forever chemicals that they tried to hide. And there's this article
Yeah,
about Chris Hansen who was doing blood tests in 92 and at 3M. And she was saying, why are they doing this? And then
yeah.
she would report that the polyfluorides were in the blood, and then they hid it for the next 10 years until the lawsuit by the EPA. And I think it was about 2009 or 2010. I don't remember, but it was,
But you think
one of
about it,
those.
and it's like, shouldn't somebody go to jail?
Yeah. Yeah, they should.
I mean,
Well, I mean,
what's the same thing?
$453 million on what, a multi-billion dollar company,
Yeah.
right? So it's
Well,
like, I
look at the
don't.
OxyContin is kind of the similar legislation too.
Yeah.
When they're trying to go bankrupt, they want to still keep 10 billion. They're going to pay 6 billion. They made 16 billion, and you're like, no, and not
Yeah.
a soul from that family. What is the family that did the Oxy?
That's the Purdue, right?
Purdue. Yeah,
Yeah.
they didn't. Nobody's going to jail, and yet. How many people have died? I mean, forget the Mexicans. It wasn't the Mexicans bringing it in. It wasn't the Hispanic people. It wasn't the Central
They
American
love to do
people.
that too.
It
They
was
love to
it was the
target
damn
people outside the
pharmaceutical
country.
companies, and it was the study that said that OxyContin was not addictive. Oh my God, who who? How can you
It
write
was
that
shown to
trash?
be addictive too.
What?
It was shown to be addictive as well. Did you watch the Painkiller Netflix kind of?
No, I didn't. I
That
didn't.
was really, really good. You had Ferris Bueller play the Purdue Pharma guy that kind of
Yeah,
reinvented OxyContin because before people weren't buying it. But then
yeah,
when it was rebranded as a miracle drug, it
hmm
was immediately picked up. Similar to
yeah.
cocaine in 1890 when you had all these people come back and say, "Oh, like gosh, we're really hurting all over the place, and everybody's addicted to opium." And then Sigmund Freud was a big proponent of cocaine, which completely turned everybody around, and then they just got addicted to another chemical. It's like right, and it's like you see this time and time again in
Opium,
history,
cocaine. What's better? Is
time and
that's the
time again in history. Gosh,
yeah.
no, but
And then the government comes in, and nobody. The only people that suffer are those that took it.
yeah, exactly.
And the
This would
families
actually
and the
be after,
and the stuff
yeah,
that they leave, and then the people themselves that sold it, pushed it, marketed it. They've gathered enough wealth that they can hide from it, and you see this all the
100%.
time.
What
You
I
know.
was thinking too was just to get back to the Patriot thing,
Oh yeah,
the term expat, and
yeah,
I think that we are the only country in the world with said term.
yeah,
I can't imagine that. People in France have ex franc or something? I don't think so.
yeah.
Right? I
But
think
that's
that
it. Expatriate. Uh,
that's what it means when America
expat.
moves overseas.
Uh,
Isn't that bizarre?
well, the expat definition is a person who lives outside their native country. A British expat who's been living in Amsterdam for
Oh,
14
it's
years.
anybody. It's not just
It's
an
so it's
American.
anybody. The thing
Oh,
is, the
okay.
thing is that I don't know what the difference between an expat and an immigrant is. You know,
Yeah, that's what I was wondering as well. What the difference?
when you think about it, it's like expat often has connections of a temporary or professional or higher socioeconomic status than immigrant. It's a broader term. Uh, is more permanent relocation. So that's kind of the difference. That one is seen as being wealthier. That's the expat. Uh, Better socioeconomic scale, of course, that's the same thing. And or they're there because of business or whatever the case may be. Whereas an immigrant is just the trash guy that kind of snuck in across the border. You know,
That's funny that everything's just inherently linked to class. And people say, "Oh,
right?
we're not on a caste system anymore. Oh no, we're not in these kind of
Not as
derived
much.
categories. But I don't know, the ever-growing middle class in America that
Well, it's
seems
not
to
growing.
exist now. Or I mean, I guess the
I don't think
shrinking,
that the middle
sorry, the
class is growing. I think
shrinking
it's
middle
shrinking, and
class.
I think
Yeah.
that's been a problem. It's been shrinking since the
Mhm.
'50s, and I think there are a lot of questions and answers as to what's happened. I mean, you can uh, you can argue that things that used to, uh, I mean, it used to be could one person could work 40 hours a week, and they could afford a house, a car, and you know, and the kids would all have food for the most part.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know the socioeconomic when we say that is like, did that mean, was that for only the white people? Was that for
Oh,
only,
probably, yeah.
you know, because we were that family, and we didn't get by very well. And my mother was on a GS1 salary, and that's what we survived on. And I'd say like we were just getting by,
Well, I
just
think it's
just
funny
you
too
know
that you still continually see these things like Walmart and that huge lawsuit where mentally deficient people and minorities were working there and they were getting paid below minimum wage. And
yeah.
it still exists. It's still a different scape. The
And the
system will
person at the top makes
always,
$25 billion. But the problem is
yep,
they're going to say it's not really they didn't really do it because management at the local Walmart knows that their bonus is tied to profitability. So the way to be more profitable, if you can't change the prices on the items, you can't change the hours of the store, you can't do anything more than marketing that Walmart does for you. How do you change the profitability of the store? You
shrink the
have to
wages.
cut costs. How do you cut costs? Well, you can turn the air conditioning down. Well, that'll reduce sales. That kind of stuff. You can try to do different suppliers that are cheaper, but Walmart is supplying all your goods, so you can't. How do you can't screen that? So the only option you have is your overhead in the immediate store, which is make your shelves last longer. Don't use as much pricing tape and all that other kind of silly stuff. Reduce your overhead by workers' hours. That's it. There's really, I mean, how do you change that? You if you're trying to reduce, people say shrinkage, which is 1 to 4%, which is theft and trashed goods and broken stuff and broken packs and all that. That's that's kind of a thing, but that's incredibly difficult to do anything about that because that's been around for years. Roughly the same
They
number.
still burn their clothes too when they can't
Yeah,
sell them.
I
Isn't
hate
that
that.
interesting? Why do they do that? Same with
I hate
Zara.
that.
Zara
I
also
hate that.
burns all their clothes when they can't sell them. You think it'd be good PR to just give them away, but at that point, when you're a multi-billion dollar company, PR don't really matter. PR don't
No,
really
it does
matter.
and it doesn't. I mean,
Yeah.
it did to Disney when they did the thing. I mean, it was the
What
weirdest
thing
thing when
was
they
that? What do they do?
well, they went against the government for, I don't know. Disney became a woke corporation in Florida because I forgot what they did. They did something, or Coca-Cola would be a better example. No, Bud Light would be probably the best example where they hired a transgender
Oh, I
person to
guess you're right.
sell
Yeah,
Bud
yeah.
Light.
That
That
changed.
really good
Yeah,
example,
that
you
is a
know.
really good example.
And people reacted, and they hurt Bud Light financially, which is a sea of brown Bavaria. Well, the problem is
But isn't Bud Light just owned by Budweiser as well, which is more of the anti-woke kind of beer? They have two,
exactly, and that
right?
was the
Yeah.
problem. What they were trying to do is they were trying to expand market share. They have when you have all of one class of people, it would be like if you had you had rapper beer, and only rappers drank this kind of beer. And now all of a sudden you want to add if you wanted to add uh the Klan into the rapper beer, it probably wouldn't be a good idea
But
if
if
you
you
started to market.
rebrand the rapper beer as something else, then
Right. But
that's
if
where
you
you and
called
it's
it
the
Rapper
same.
Light and said that you at the Klan should buy Rapper Light beer, that and that's kind of what they did. They were really stupid. They thought Bud Light would be good for transgender people as well as rednecks to drive pickups. And you got to say, whoever the guy that thought this out, and it wasn't it was a team, and they made a marketing decision that they were going to use this person. But here's the thing, they were only doing it in one very, very small social media market. This was not something that was played nationally. This was
It
targeted
wasn't
in a
really.
very in a
Wow.
very narrow sliver. See, that was the thinking in the marketing. It's like,
I
hey,
thought it was
Zach,
national.
you
The
and
way
I, we could be part of the Klan over here, or we could like the black people over here, and we could sell to both sides, and no one will ever look over there. And you're like, what are you, a fucking idiot? And it's like, anywhere you play social media, other people can pick it up and use it for their own gain. And I can imagine that if I was a competitor of Bud Light, say Coors Light, I would, once that popped, I would take your social media and I would shove it into every national news person's thing, saying that, hey, they're going woke, and then your sales would go down, my sales would go
Well,
up.
you say small niche market in social media, but what does that necessarily mean? Because the algorithm, I feel like, changes all the time. And I feel
Well,
like people's algorithms kind of always are reinventing themselves. So I feel
well,
like
if I go on
anybody could
Facebook,
really see
if I go on
something like
Facebook,
that.
I could pick every user that was friendly to transgender and gay people in a segment, and I could market this video just to them. I could do the same thing in LinkedIn. I could do the same thing in a number of different platforms. You can do that. That your information is gathered, whether you are everything that you've said you liked or didn't like. They know if you vote Republican, if you vote Democrat, if you're fat, if you're
Isn't that
skinny,
wild?
what food you eat, what day of the month your period is. They know all that stuff, and it's all in a scheduled sheet. You can actually go to Facebook and see. I've got like a 60-page report or whatever
I'd
of
love to
who
read
and
my report,
what mine is.
who I
But
am.
when you look at that, you start to realize that they took and they dumped it into that narrow. I'm sure, I don't know because I didn't do it, but I'm sure that they picked out that narrow bucket, and they had blinders saying that it will go anywhere else.
But then it
And,
ended up going
and
everywhere else. Yeah.
yeah, because the thing is that you have to think that if I'm your competitor, if I was their competitor, I would have showed that to everybody. And I would have said, you know what? They've got 3% of the gay market share. We're Coors Light. We got 16%, or gay or trans or LGBT, the big letter thing.
Yes.
they have X percentage of that. And so they're trying to up that percentage. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a big bite out of their redneck market. And that's what we would do. And then Coors Light. I mean, I don't know if this is what happened, but I would think, and this is what I would do as a competitor, because anytime I saw a mistake in any company that was a competitor of ours, we would point it out. We point it out aggressively. I mean, like put it into an email and say, "Hey, look what they did," and we were very direct about it. We were not indirect. Which, if I was $1 billion company, I'd be very indirect. I would just say, "Hey, I would pay 30 news rags X amount of dollars to write a story about how they're treating their redneck market poorly."
Well, that's
That's what I
also
would
what
do.
they do right before the Oscars as well. You remember
Yeah,
hearing all that stuff about Bradley Cooper come out
yeah,
right
yeah,
like a week before the Oscars,
yeah.
and that was all. Yeah, that whole thing is. I didn't realize how violent
Competitive.
and competitive. Yeah, that
Well,
whole
what kind of
market is,
money do you think is when
and
they?
it's such a niche market for like winners. If you think about it too, it's like 3 people that are nominated. And it's
Yeah.
like you have to slander, you have to slander
Well,
one of these
it's
three
how you
people.
win, because they've
Yeah,
learned in politics that it's not that you have to like me, it's that I have to shit on you,
that's
which
extremely
seems
political. Yeah,
horrible. And I mean that's nothing new.
the ever
That's been
growing
around for
political
decades
spectrum.
and decades. Some people have fought, it was kindler and gentler before, but remember in the 1800s the guy that beat the other guy to a cripple with his cane
Oh yeah,
in
yeah,
the
yeah, I
Senate.
remember that guy.
So
Yeah,
so it's not like it hasn't happened this way before. Tammany Hall in the turn of the century, when what the hell was his name? They used to go out and they get you drunk, and if you didn't want to drink their beer to vote for them, they beat you to senseless, and you're like, okay, well, they don't do that,
that was like the Whigs and the other people that used to
right?
hang outside the office, and they would ask you who you were voting for, and if you answered the wrong answer, they beat you to death pretty
Right.
much in front of the
Exactly.
votee. That's why we have a hidden fun fact. Our political party and who you're affiliated with is hidden
Yeah.
for the
And it
most
should be.
part. Yeah,
That's fine.
because of that actual reason. Yeah.
Well, and well, unfortunately, when you look at foreign nations that are under fire, like Iraq, when they had their election, you know what they do? They paint their fingers
Why?
because you go in and you vote, and then they put a indelible ink on your finger so it lasts for like a day or two, so you
Mm.
can't vote again.
Ah.
And but here's the problem: for the next day and a half, you have to hide that finger because if someone sees it, and they were, I mean, like ISIS was, who was it? Was it Afghanistan or was it Iraq? Or it's like in every third world, whatever, every country that we've been in some type of conflict with where we were overseeing the elections, that there's a lot of people that just don't want you to vote at all because then you're accepting that home rule of the Americans, the patriots,
Yep.
where we go
Quote
over and
unquote patriots. Yeah.
stomp on other nations and for whatever perceived financial gains that we can get at that particular point. I mean, that's what we are when you think about it.
Mhm.
It's funny, we're a conquering nation. We take things that we want, and if we don't like things the way they are, and if you don't do things the way we want, we punish you, and
Well,
we
I don't really
punish you
understand the political
horribly.
experiments too that we were doing in South America, where we were so afraid of communism taking over the world. I don't understand why communism.
I don't know.
I don't really.
I don't
I
think
never
that
really.
was
That I guess it was kind of a way in which we disguised it as just colonialism. We said that, oh, this
right.
is oh, you're just a different person. When in
I mean,
fact, if they just called us to colonialists, that was
when
kind of
you look
what
at
we did.
Cuba,
The rebranding. Oh, we're really talking about
when you look
rebranding in
at
a lot of
Cuba
ways.
in the 50s, like 96% of the country was illiterate. They didn't live indoors. Many died before 40. So whatever crap you say about Castro and all this kind of stuff, uh, this was a nation run by a few oligarchical rich people. Just it was crazy the amount of wealth that was in the hands of few. And it was the same thing all through Central America. You get a 10-pot dictator get there, and the US would say, "Hey, Zach, you know, if you do what we want and vote in the United Nations the way we want and do this and this and then this, we're going to give you $500 million a year, and you can keep your people. And then so you would, and we'll give you military equipment, all this kind of stuff, and you can beat back all those communists." And they weren't. We called them communists, and most of the time they were people that just want to eat, you know. So it's like a nation of free people. It's like that's what many of those nations were looking for, and we would have the CIA down there trying to balance powers out and stuff like that. And I don't know. It just it did we and make no mistake that there wasn't another country, two, three, four big world powers that were there as well, trying to do the same thing. Okay, it wasn't just we decided on our own. We know ways to protect ourselves, but we also we know that the other side, like our elections, they're being monitored heavily and trying to be swayed by foreign nations. There's no doubt about it.
Oh yeah,
We that's factually correct, and for whatever reason and for whatever way.
that's what you saw in
Uh,
2016.
the idea that people want to make it so our elections to seem as though they're not true, correct, and clean is a way to destabilize our nation. And if America gets destabilized, the foreign powers against us, which would be China and Russia, would have a leg up in some respects. I think the problem that China would have is that wholly a third of their economy is us. So they would be if they hurt us that bad, their GDP would go to hell, and we default on our debt, and then
That's what I
be
was thinking about
they would
too.
crumble as a society, whereas Russia would, I believe, would come out very, very well. So I don't, or much better than those. But the problem when you destabilize a nation that's central to the whole world, it's going to hurt a lot of different people because, a lot of people have their money in the U.S. markets. We talk about the greatness of America. Let's not talk about how educated we are because we're not. We're not as educated as many countries. We're not. We're just as
46% of people can't read above the 6th grade reading level.
we're free or
That's
not
crazy.
free as what 25 other nations or something like that. There's a ton of other nations that are free. What we have is we have the best financial markets in the world. We have we have a great system. People trust when they see in our markets what's happening. They believe in the New York Stock Exchange. They believe in NASDAQ. They believe that when they buy and sell a security there, that it's true and correct. They believe that the agency that the SEC is that monitors them makes it true and correct. All around the world, we are the envy. Our companies pay more to get on the exchange and disclose more information about what happens than anywhere else in the world. It's easier, it's more accessible, it's more transparent. It's an amazing thing. And if we sell anything, we should be selling that we are basically, good, bad, or indifferent, the financial raising tool of the world. We're so far ahead of so many others, and in so many different ways. Most want to copy our system. Some want to copy parts of it, but they don't like the arduous disclosure requirements and things like that. So
I
but I
never
think
really thought
that
about that, but we do have really ridiculous disclosure requirements that keeps it
yeah.
very transparent, which I think is
Well, that's the only
comparison
I
to
mean that
any other
and
country.
that is something to be damn proud of. That's it. That's a big thing. We make when you talk about production of oil and gas and things like that, we do that better than anyone. The Saudis hire us to come into their nation and make it work. I mean, all of Central and South America, they're not going. They don't go to BP. They go to Chevron. Why? Because technologically we're well ahead. When you start to look at technology in general, they're trying to move it to different countries around the world. But I mean, when you think about the largest companies in the world that are technologically advanced, Google, Facebook, Microsoft. I mean, when you could look at the top 25 technology companies, and they're all US based. Or they were US based and they offshored for a tax break. But they started here because we have a way to give you the ability to start, to think, to the desire to create something out of nothing, and the ability to raise crazy amounts of capital and for other people to share in it as it grows. And you have that in other markets. And I mean, I know people that have moved to the Far East, there's places there where they try to do the same thing, and some of them do, but not to our level. They just don't. We have multiple different areas from Austin to Boston to Silicon Valley to, we have so many different places.
It is really bi-coastal as well, if you think about it.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Everywhere.
I mean, pharmaceuticals, all the pharmaceuticals, the great pharmaceuticals were all made up in Boston. I can't remember the road out there. That's one of the huge places for pharmacy companies. The Silicon Valley technology, computers, silicon chip, that's the whole thing there. I mean, each one has a specialty. Colorado, Denver, they have a natural thing. I don't, it's there's a number of companies that are nature and natural and online and all that kind of stuff. But they locales foster that ability to basically let you fail and let you have access to something that you wouldn't anywhere else. And I think that is that's what makes our country great. And another thing that's great is that I think that the ability to say that our education system isn't wonderful, we need to make it better, and I don't believe privatizing it's better. I think we need to demonstrate where a huge area that's been privatized makes sense. Like they try to privatize Social Security. I mean, finance, I don't believe that. I think we would get there's so many things that the private sector does shitty. One being healthcare. I mean, we can point to healthcare and say that the privatization of healthcare in the U.S. has been an abject failure. We can point to the amount of money we spend, and yet people are dying at younger ages and things like that. You can't.
I would definitely agree with that. And the access
You can't
to
argue with that.
healthcare in general when it's privatized
That's
is a nightmare.
we want to be healthier and live longer, and we're spending 8 to 10 times what the next country is spending, and we're not. We're just not. And we talk about having the greatest military in the world, and we might have the greatest military people in the world, but we certainly don't have the greatest military.
Maybe when
We
they
have
can pass an audit of $3 trillion, that we can figure out where that went.
audit in each one of the departments, yes, but
I'd like to figure
why
out
do we
where
keep
that.
losing wars? If we're so great,
Yeah, I don't really
you
understand
know,
that part either. They go on
it,
for 20 plus years. That just seems like a
well,
fucking
you start
thing.
to realize that war is in itself is that's the mistake. You can't. It's very very hard to
Yeah.
unless it's a very defined thing and a person that you're going up against. That you're better off just shooting that person and moving on.
No, for sure.
And
Well,
then
on
because
that
you need
note, we're running out of time actually. We got to wrap up here. But as always, thank you guys for listening to our
yeah
jargon and our ramblings. And happy what day is it today? Tuesday.
7/16,
Yeah,
July
today's
16th.
Tuesday. Yeah. Happy
It's
Tuesday to
Amazon
everybody out
Prime
there.
Day, isn't it, or something like that?
Oh, it is actually. Let me hop
Yeah,
on
go
there.
buy something online.
Go buy something for us.
Yeah,
Go support Amazon. We love
send
that.
us a new pair of sunglasses.
Go get a Slurpee from 7-Eleven. But
Yeah.
as always, we have the Q&A section below. Love to hear your comments and everything like that. And be easy and be breezy. Do you have any final comments?
Joe, we're waiting.
Yep, we are still waiting. All
Yeah.
right, bye-bye everybody.
Bye.